Why do women start to dislike their husbands as they get older? Have you ever sat across from your husband at the dinner table watching him eat in silence and wondered, when did things change? Maybe you used to hang on his every word, laugh at his jokes, and feel warmth when he walked into the room. But now you feel tired. Tired of the same conversations, the same routines, the same little annoyances that never used to bother you but now seem impossible to ignore. Maybe he doesn't talk as much as he used to, or maybe he talks too much about things that no longer interest you. Maybe you've realized that the man you built a life with feels more like a housemate than a partner. And maybe, just maybe, you've felt guilty for feeling this way. After all, you've spent decades together. You've raised children, weathered storms, and built a history that no one else in the world shares with you. Shouldn't that be enough? If any of this sounds familiar, let me assure you, you are not alone. As the years go by, many women begin to feel a quiet, growing distance from their husbands. It doesn't always happen suddenly. Sometimes, it's a slow fade, a gradual unraveling of the closeness you once had. And while it's rarely talked about openly, it's far more common than you might think. So, why does this happen? Why do so many women, after a lifetime of love, commitment, and shared memories, find themselves feeling disconnected, frustrated, or even resentful toward the men they once adored? That's exactly what we're going to talk about today. This isn't about blaming men, and it's certainly not about regret. It's about understanding the shifts that happen in long-term marriages, the emotional, psychological, and societal factors that change how we see and feel about our partners over time. Most importantly, we're going to talk about what this means for you. Because feeling this way doesn't mean your marriage is broken beyond repair. It doesn't mean you don't care about your husband. It simply means that something has shifted, and maybe, just maybe, there's a way to find your way back to a connection that feels meaningful again. So, let's take a deep breath and dive into this conversation. One that so many women have had in the quiet of their own minds, but rarely out loud. Because you are not alone, and there's so much more to this story than meets the eye. Are you ready? Let's begin. Section 1, the early love verse. The reality of time. Do you remember the early days of your marriage? The way your heart would skip a beat when he walked into the room. The way you'd talk for hours, dreaming about the future, making promises, and sharing laughter over the simplest things. Back then, love felt effortless. It was full of excitement, passion, and the kind of closeness that made everything seem possible. You didn't have to try to be happy together. It just happened. But then, life happened. The years rolled on, and with them came responsibilities. Children, careers, financial stress, housework, aging parents. Slowly, the days that were once filled with laughter and adventure became filled with to-do lists and exhaustion. And suddenly, love didn't feel so effortless anymore. From lovers to life managers. One of the biggest changes that happens in a long-term marriage is the shift from romantic partners to life managers. In the beginning, your relationship was about love, fun, and connection. But over time, it became about survival. You became partners in running a household. You had to make decisions about money, raise children, and keep everything running smoothly. Conversations became more about, did you pay that bill? And what should we do about the leaking faucet? Instead of, I love you, and tell me your dreams. Before you even realized it, the spark that once made your marriage exciting started to fade. Not because you stopped loving each other, but because there was simply no time or energy left for love the way it once was. The slow buildup of unspoken disappointments. At first, the little disappointments were easy to ignore. Maybe he forgot your birthday one year. Maybe he stopped complimenting you like he used to. Maybe he didn't notice that you were struggling and needed help. And so, you brushed it off. After all, he was busy too. But then it happened again, and again, and again. Over time, these little disappointments started stacking up like bricks, building an invisible wall between you. And without even realizing it, you stopped reaching for him the way you once did. Maybe you started keeping your thoughts to yourself because it felt easier than starting another argument. Maybe you stopped expecting him to notice when you were upset. Maybe you even convinced yourself that this was just how marriage was supposed to feel after so many years. But deep down, a part of you started wondering, is this all there is? And that's where the first cracks begin to form. Not from one big argument or betrayal, but from the slow, quiet loss of connection that happens when two people stop seeing each other the way they once did. But why does this happen? Why do women feel it so deeply while men often don't seem to notice? That brings us to the next big reason. Section 2. Unmet emotional needs and lack of deep connection. If you've ever felt like your husband just doesn't see you anymore, you're not imagining things. One of the biggest reasons women start to feel distant from their husbands is because their emotional needs go unmet for years, even decades, without being acknowledged. And here's the thing. It's usually not intentional. Most men don't wake up one day and decide to stop being emotionally available. Instead, they assume that everything is fine unless their wife says otherwise. But for many women, it doesn't feel natural to say, "I feel lonely," or "I don't feel close to you anymore." Instead, we hope our husbands will notice. And when they don't, it feels like they just don't care. Women crave emotional connection. Men often don't realize it's missing. Men and women experience emotional intimacy very differently. For many women, emotional connection means having meaningful conversations, not just about daily life, but about thoughts, feelings, and dreams. Feeling heard and understood, not just given advice or solutions. Knowing that their husband sees them, not just as a wife or mother, but as a person with needs, desires, and emotions. Feeling appreciated and valued, even after decades together. But many men assume that as long as there's no major conflict, the relationship is fine. If there's food on the table, the bills are paid, and no one is yelling, they believe everything is as it should be. This is why so many women feel invisible in their marriages. They feel unseen, unheard, and emotionally disconnected. Not because their husbands don't love them, but because their husbands don't always realize what they need. The pain of feeling unheard. Have you ever tried to talk to your husband about something that mattered to you, only to feel like he wasn't really listening? Maybe he nodded along but didn't actually engage. Maybe he gave a quick, dismissive answer. Or maybe he turned the conversation back to himself without even realizing it. That moment, where you reached for connection and didn't get it, is what creates emotional loneliness in marriage. Over time, these moments add up. You stop sharing as much. You stop expecting him to understand. You start turning inward, feeling like you have to deal with your emotions alone. And eventually, the distance grows. Emotional neglect doesn't have to be intentional to hurt. Here's the hard truth. Even the most loving husband can be emotionally neglectful without realizing it. When he dismisses your feelings instead of trying to understand them, it creates distance. When he assumes you're fine instead of checking in, it makes you feel invisible. When he stops asking about your thoughts and opinions, it makes you feel unimportant. When he assumes you'll always be there, without effort or appreciation, it makes you feel taken for granted. And when a woman feels this way for long enough, resentment starts to replace love. She may still care about her husband. She may still value the life they've built together. But deep inside, a part of her starts to shut down. And once a woman starts feeling disconnected emotionally, everything else in the marriage starts to feel like a burden. The small annoyances, his habits, his routines, the way he breathes too loudly, become unbearable. Not because they're really that bad, but because they are reminders of the deeper emotional void between you. And if this emotional distance isn't addressed, it only gets worse. So, where does this leave you? If you've ever felt like your husband doesn't see you anymore, if you've ever felt like the emotional connection you once had is gone, know this: you are not being dramatic. You are not imagining things. You are not alone. This is something that happens to many, many women in long-term marriages. And it's not because you don't love your husband. It's because human relationships are living things that need care, attention, and emotional effort to survive. So what happens next? Can this emotional distance be repaired? Or is it the beginning of the end? That's what we'll explore in the next chapters. Because understanding why this happens is the first step toward figuring out what to do about it. Stay with me. We're just getting started. Section 3. The mental load and resentment. Let's talk about something that most women understand all too well, but that many men don't fully see. The mental load. Even if your husband was always a good provider, even if he worked hard to put food on the table, even if he never complained, chances are you were the one carrying the weight of the home, the family, and the emotions of everyone around you. And that weight? It adds up over time. What is the mental load? The mental load isn't just about housework. It's about being the one who remembers everything. Keeping track of doctor's appointments, birthdays, and family gatherings. Knowing when the grandkids need a gift, when the bills are due, or when the house needs fixing. Worrying about how everyone is feeling. Whether your children are okay, whether your husband is content, whether your home is running smoothly. For decades, you may have played the role of the manager, the one who organized, planned, and made sure everything got done. Even if your husband was helpful, chances are he waited to be told what to do, while you carried the burden of keeping track of it all. And here's the truth. That can lead to deep resentment. The quiet buildup of frustration. When you were younger, maybe you accepted this as part of life. Maybe you even took pride in it. But as you've gotten older, have you ever stopped and thought, why do I still have to be the one who remembers everything? Why do I feel exhausted when my husband seems so relaxed? Why do I feel invisible, like no one notices everything I do? This kind of resentment doesn't always explode in loud fights. Instead, it builds slowly, like a slow drip of water on a rock. Over time, it wears you down. Maybe you've started to feel more irritable with him. Maybe you've stopped engaging in long conversations because, deep down, you feel like he just doesn't get it. Maybe you've even withdrawn, focusing more on yourself because you're tired of taking care of everyone else. The difference between helping and taking responsibility. Many husbands will say, "But I help, just tell me what to do." But that's exactly the problem. Women don't want to have to ask all the time. They don't want to be managers in their own homes. They want an equal partner, someone who notices what needs to be done and takes responsibility for it without being told. If your husband still expects you to carry the weight of the household, even after decades together, It's no surprise that your patience has worn thin. What can be done? The good news is, it's never too late to have an honest conversation. Many men don't even realize the burden their wives have carried for years. But resentment doesn't go away on its own. It needs to be acknowledged. Ask yourself, have I told him how I feel? Or have I just expected him to notice? Does he understand that I don't just need help, but a true partner in running this home? Is there anything I can let go of so that I'm not carrying everything? Marriage is about balance. And if you've been carrying too much for too long, maybe it's time to set some of it down. Section 4. The loss of attraction, more than just physical. Attraction isn't just about looks, it's about connection. It's about the little things, the way you once looked at each other, the way he used to make you laugh, the way you used to feel like he saw you. But what happens when that fades? When love becomes routine? As the years go by, many couples settle into routines. Maybe at first those routines felt comforting, but over time they can become stagnant. The same conversations over and over, sitting in the same chairs, watching the same shows, eating the same meals, feeling like you're simply coexisting rather than truly connecting. This doesn't mean you don't love each other, but when life becomes predictable, it's easy for attraction to fade. Emotional attraction, the key to staying connected. Aging changes us. Our bodies, our minds, our needs, everything evolves. And for many women, emotional attraction becomes far more important than physical attraction. You might not need flowers or candlelit dinners anymore, but you do need to feel seen, not just as a wife or mother, but as a woman with thoughts, feelings, and dreams. To feel heard, to have real conversations, not just small talk about the weather or what's on TV. To feel valued, to know that after all these years, your presence still matters. If your husband stopped making an effort, if he stopped engaging in real conversations, stopped flirting, stopped showing appreciation, then it's no wonder that your feelings toward him have changed. The danger of taking each other for granted. One of the biggest killers of attraction is being taken for granted. When you've been with someone for decades, it's easy to assume that they'll always be there. That's why so many couples stop trying. They stop making each other feel special. They stop putting in effort. And after years of feeling unseen, many women start to shut down emotionally. You might have thought to yourself, I don't even feel like a woman anymore, just a caretaker. He doesn't notice me, so why should I try? I miss the way we used to be. That longing for excitement, for appreciation, for true companionship, it never goes away. And if it's been ignored for too long, it can turn into frustration, resentment, or even a complete emotional disconnection. Is it too late to reignite attraction? Absolutely not, but it takes effort from both sides. Attraction doesn't thrive in routine. It thrives in connection, curiosity, and small acts of appreciation. Have real conversations. Ask him something deeper than just, "Did you take out the trash?" Break the routine. Try something new together, even if it's as simple as taking a different walking route or cooking a new recipe. Remember what made you fall in love. Revisit old memories. Look at old photos. Talk about the past, but also about the future. Because at the end of the day, attraction isn't just about how someone looks. It's about how they make you feel. And if your husband has stopped making you feel special, maybe it's time to talk about it. Section 5. Changing identities and personal growth. As the years go by, something happens. Something that no one really warns us about when we first get married. We change. Not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, and even spiritually. The woman you were in your 20s or 30s is not the same woman you are today. And that's a good thing. Growth is natural. We evolve with time, shaped by our experiences, our hardships, and the lessons life teaches us. But what happens when one person changes and the other stays the same? Who you were versus who you've become. Think back to the woman you were when you first got married. Maybe you were full of dreams, excited to build a life with your husband, eager to take on the role of wife and mother. In those early years, much of your identity may have revolved around taking care of others, your husband, your children, your home. But as time passed, things shifted. The kids grew up and moved out. You may have retired from work. You may have started to ask yourself, who am I outside of being a wife and mother? What do I want for the rest of my life? Am I truly happy with where I am? For many women, these questions bring a deep awakening. Suddenly, you realize that you have needs, dreams, and desires that have been buried under years of responsibilities. You may crave adventure, creativity, or deeper emotional fulfillment. But what happens if your husband hasn't changed? When one person outgrows the other? One of the biggest reasons women start to feel disconnected from their husbands is because they've grown in ways their husbands haven't. Maybe you've developed new interests: reading, gardening, traveling, volunteering, while your husband is content sitting in his chair, watching TV, following the same routine he always has. Maybe you've started to explore new ideas, engage in deeper conversations, or think about life differently, while your husband still sees things the way he always has. It can feel lonely when the person you've spent your life with no longer seems to be on the same journey as you. And sometimes, that loneliness turns into frustration. Why doesn't he want to grow with me? Why does he seem content while I feel restless? Why do I feel like I'm outgrowing this marriage? These feelings are real. And they can be painful. The danger of stagnation in marriage. Marriage isn't just about loving each other. It's about growing together. When one person continues to evolve while the other stays stuck in old patterns, it creates a disconnect. Many women start to feel like they're living with a stranger, or worse, like they're living with a shadow of the man they once knew. The spark that once existed between you begins to fade, not necessarily because of a lack of love, but because you're simply not the same people anymore. So, what can be done? Can you grow together instead of apart? The answer is yes, but it requires both of you to be willing. Talk about your growth. Share your thoughts, your dreams, your new interests. See if he's open to learning and growing with you. Invite him into your world. If you've taken up a new hobby or passion, ask him to join you. Sometimes men just need an invitation. Encourage him to explore. Some men get stuck in routines because they don't know what else to do. Help him find new interests. Accept that you may always be different, and that's okay. The goal isn't to be the same, it's to support each other's growth instead of resisting it. Because at the end of the day, marriage is at its best when both people feel seen, valued, and understood, even as they change. Section 6. Communication breakdown, the silent killer. If there's one thing that causes marriages to unravel more than anything else, it's the lack of real communication. Not the everyday talk about what's for dinner or what errands need to be done, not the surface-level conversations about the weather or the news. We're talking about deep, meaningful conversations, the kind that keep a relationship alive. How communication changes over time. Think back to the early days of your marriage. You probably talked for hours about everything: your dreams, your fears, your thoughts about the future. You probably looked forward to spending time together, sharing stories, laughing, and connecting. You probably felt heard, like your voice mattered, like your thoughts were important. But over time, many couples stop having those conversations. Why? Life gets busy, kids take priority. Responsibilities pile up. You fall into routines where you assume you already know everything about each other, and before you know it, real conversation disappears. When talking feels like a chore. For many women, this is where the frustration begins. You might have tried to talk, tried to express your feelings, your concerns, your needs. But instead of a real conversation, you got a dismissive response. You worry too much. A lack of interest. Why do we have to talk about this? A defensive reaction. So you're saying I'm a bad husband. Over time, you stop trying. You stop bringing up issues because it feels pointless. You stop expecting deep conversations because they never happen. You stop opening up because it feels like talking to a wall. And little by little, resentment builds. The difference between how men and women communicate. One of the biggest issues in long-term marriages is that men and women communicate differently. Women often seek conversation for connection, to feel emotionally close, to share, to be understood. Men often communicate for solutions. They listen to fix a problem, not necessarily to connect. So when a woman says, "I feel lonely in this marriage," a man might hear, "She's unhappy with me." And instead of talking about it, he shuts down. Or when a woman says, "I need more affection," a man might respond with, "But I do things for you. Doesn't that count?" Because he sees love as actions, not words. This miscommunication leads to decades of frustration. Women feel unheard, and men feel like they can never do anything right. Breaking the silence. The good news. It's never too late to start talking again. Choose the right time. Avoid bringing up serious topics when either of you is tired, frustrated, or distracted. Be clear about your needs. Instead of saying, "You never listen to me," try, "I miss the way we used to talk. Can we have more of those moments?" Encourage small changes. A 5-minute meaningful conversation is better than no conversation at all. Because when communication dies, so does connection. And if you want to rekindle the love you once had, the first step is simple. Start talking again. Section 7. The impact of motherhood on marriage. For many women, becoming a mother is one of the most defining moments of life. The moment you hold your child in your arms, something inside you shifts. Your heart expands, your priorities change, and suddenly your purpose revolves around nurturing, protecting, and raising this tiny human. But what happens to your marriage when you go from being a wife first to being a mother first? Many women don't realize it in the moment, but the transition into motherhood often marks the beginning of a shift in their relationship with their husband. From lovers to co-parents. Before children, marriage is often full of romance, spontaneity, and connection. Late-night conversations, weekend getaways, holding hands just because, it all feels effortless. But once children come into the picture, everything changes. Sleep deprivation takes over. Intimate nights turn into exhausted evenings spent trying to get the baby to sleep. Your focus shifts. Instead of prioritizing your husband's needs, your energy goes into keeping the children happy and safe. Your identity changes. You're no longer just his wife, you're someone's mother, and that role is all-consuming. And while this shift is natural, it often creates an emotional distance between husband and wife. Many men struggle to understand this. They might feel neglected, pushed aside, or unimportant compared to the children. And many women, feeling overwhelmed by the demands of motherhood, simply don't have the energy to nurture their marriage the way they once did. The silent drift, when marriage takes a back seat. For years, sometimes even decades, many women put their marriage on hold without even realizing it. They prioritize the kids' schedules over date nights. They stop having deep conversations because they're too exhausted. They give so much love to their children that they don't have anything left to give their husband. By the time the kids grow up and move out, they suddenly look at their husband and think, "Who are we now?" The man who was once their partner now feels like a stranger. When husbands don't evolve into supportive fathers. One of the biggest sources of resentment for women in long-term marriages is when they feel like they had to carry the majority of the parenting responsibilities. If your husband was the kind of father who saw parenting as your job, that resentment doesn't just disappear. If he was emotionally distant or uninvolved, it might have felt like raising the children was something you did alone, even though you were married. And as the years pass, it's hard to forget that feeling. It's hard to suddenly reconnect with someone who felt absent during some of the most exhausting years of your life. Healing the marriage after the kids are grown. If you've spent years prioritizing your children over your marriage, you might be wondering, is it too late to fix things? The good news: no, it's not too late, but it does take effort. Rediscover who you are as a couple. Without the kids in the house, what do you enjoy doing together? What made you fall in love in the first place? Talk about the past. If there are lingering resentments from the parenting years, don't let them sit in silence. Talk about how you felt and see if you can find understanding. Prioritize each other again. You gave everything to your children. Now it's time to give something back to your marriage, because at the end of the day, once the children have left, it's just the two of you again. And whether that feels like a blessing or a burden depends on how willing you are to reconnect. Section 8. The absence of appreciation and affection. After years, or even decades together, one of the most common reasons women start to dislike their husbands is simple. They feel unappreciated. Not in the big dramatic ways, not in the moments when gifts or grand gestures happen, but in the small, everyday moments, the ones that slowly chip away at love. The silent erosion of gratitude. At the beginning of a relationship, appreciation is effortless. Thank you for making dinner. You look beautiful today. I love the way you take care of us. But as the years go by, those words get replaced with silence. The meals you cook are just expected. The things you do for him are taken for granted. The way you care for the home, the children, and even him is no longer acknowledged. And over time, that silence hurts. Because here's the truth. Women don't stop loving their husbands overnight, but they do stop feeling valued. And when a woman stops feeling valued, her love starts to fade. The difference between feeling loved and feeling useful. One of the biggest frustrations women have in long-term marriages is feeling like they are more of a caretaker than a partner. Your husband might love you, but does he show it? He might rely on you, but does he appreciate you? He might assume you know how he feels, but does he express it? If you've ever felt like your husband only notices you when he needs something, but not when you need him, then you know exactly what this feels like. And the longer that feeling lingers, the more resentment grows. The power of small acts of affection. Many men assume that love is simply understood. They don't think they need to say, "I appreciate you," because in their minds, their commitment speaks for itself. But the truth is, love dies without expression. Think about the little things that once made your heart swell. The way he used to reach for your hand without thinking. The way he used to look at you like you were the most beautiful woman in the world. The way he used to make an effort, whether it was a compliment, a kiss, or a thoughtful gesture. If those things have disappeared from your marriage, it's no wonder you feel distant. Affection isn't just about grand romantic gestures. It's about the small daily moments that remind you that you're loved. Can appreciation and affection be rekindled? The good news? Yes, absolutely. But it takes effort. Tell him what you need. Some men genuinely don't realize how important verbal appreciation and small acts of affection are. If you feel unappreciated, say something. Look for small changes. If he starts making an effort, even in tiny ways, notice it. Encourage it. Lead by example. If you want more affection in your marriage, try initiating it. Hold his hand. Give a compliment. Show appreciation yourself. Sometimes one small shift can open the door to rebuilding what was lost. Because at the end of the day, love isn't just about being together. It's about making each other feel valued. And when that value is restored, so is the love. Section 9. Midlife Crises, Boredom, and the Desire for More. As the years pass, many women find themselves asking a difficult question. Is this it? Not necessarily because they're unhappy, but because life has settled into a predictable routine, one that feels comfortable yet uninspiring. The conversations are the same. The daily routine never changes. The excitement, passion, and spontaneity that once existed seem to have faded. And for many women, this realization brings an unsettling feeling, a desire for more, the midlife awakening. In our younger years, we don't often stop to question things. We're too busy working, raising children, or managing a household to pause and reflect. But as we get older, especially once the kids have grown and life slows down, we finally have time to think. For many women, this is the stage where they start to evaluate their own happiness. Am I truly content with how my life has turned out? Have I sacrificed too much of myself for others? Do I still have time to change things, to explore, to grow? This isn't necessarily a crisis, it's an awakening. But if your husband doesn't share this same awakening, it can create tension. When one partner seeks more, and the other stays the same. For some women, this stage of life brings a newfound sense of adventure. You might feel the urge to travel, try new hobbies, or push yourself out of your comfort zone. You might start thinking about the things you've always wanted to do but never had time for. You might even crave new experiences, new friendships, or deeper emotional connections. But what happens if your husband doesn't feel the same way? Many men, especially as they age, become more comfortable in routine. They may not see a reason to change things. They may be content watching TV, sitting in the same chair every evening, and keeping life exactly as it is. And while there's nothing wrong with that, it can leave you feeling trapped, like you're growing, but your marriage isn't. The fear of wasting the rest of life. Aging brings a sense of urgency. Women often reach a point where they realize that life isn't endless, that the years ahead are precious, and they don't want to spend them feeling stagnant. This is where boredom turns into frustration. You don't just want to go through the motions, you want to feel alive. You don't just want to be married, you want to feel connected to your partner. You don't just want to exist, you want to experience. But if your husband isn't on the same page, it can create a deep emotional disconnect, one that leads many women to feel distant, resentful, or even trapped in their own marriage. Can the desire for more be balanced in marriage? Absolutely. But it requires communication and effort from both sides. Invite him into your world. If you've started exploring new interests, hobbies, or dreams, talk to him about them. See if he's open to joining you. Express your feelings honestly. Instead of saying, "You're boring now," try, "I feel like I need more excitement in my life, and I'd love for us to find something new to enjoy together." Accept that some differences will remain. He may not share all of your interests, and that's okay. What matters is that he respects your growth and doesn't hold you back. Because wanting more out of life isn't selfish, it's human. And a strong marriage should support both partners in finding joy and purpose in the years ahead. Section 10. External influences, society, media, and comparison. In today's world, we are constantly surrounded by images of ideal relationships. Social media is filled with couples taking romantic vacations, celebrating anniversaries with grand gestures, and posting about their perfect marriages. TV shows and movies romanticize passion, making it seem like every relationship should be exciting and effortless. Even friends and family members talk about their marriages in a way that makes you wonder, why doesn't mine feel like that? And the more you see these things, the more you start to compare. The danger of comparison in long-term marriage. It's easy to look at other couples and feel like something is missing in your own marriage. Why don't we have that kind of connection anymore? Why doesn't my husband treat me like that? Am I settling for less than I deserve? But here's the truth. Most of what we see is only half the story. People tend to showcase the best parts of their relationships, not the struggles. The couple posting about their romantic getaway. They probably argued the night before. The woman bragging about her husband's sweet gestures. She might also feel unseen in other ways. The problem with comparison is that it makes us focus on what we lack, rather than what we have. How society shapes our expectations of marriage. As women, we've been fed different messages about marriage throughout our lives. When we were young, we were told that love should feel like a fairy tale, full of passion, adventure, and unwavering devotion. As we got older, we were told that marriage is about sacrifice, endurance, and putting family first. Now, in later years, we see messages that suggest we should still be deeply in love, still feel excited about our husbands, and still be enjoying a perfect, fulfilling marriage. But real life doesn't work that way. Marriage is a journey, and every phase looks different. Sometimes marriage is passionate and romantic. Sometimes marriage is routine and predictable. Sometimes marriage is difficult and frustrating. Sometimes marriage is simply companionship and comfort. If we constantly compare our relationships to unrealistic standards, we will always feel like we're missing something. The key to contentment in marriage. Instead of focusing on what other people's marriages look like, ask yourself, what do I truly need to feel fulfilled in this marriage? Am I comparing my relationship to unrealistic expectations? What strengths does my marriage have that I may be overlooking? That doesn't mean you should settle for unhappiness. But it does mean that instead of focusing on what your marriage lacks, it's worth appreciating what you still have. Because in the end, a perfect marriage doesn't exist. Only the one you choose to nurture does. Section 11. Affairs, emotional distance, and seeking validation elsewhere. For many women, the slow erosion of connection in a marriage can lead to an unexpected and unsettling feeling. The longing to feel desired, valued, and truly seen again. And when that need isn't met within the marriage, some women find themselves seeking validation elsewhere, sometimes intentionally, but often without realizing it at first. When emotional distance creates vulnerability. A woman doesn't wake up one day and suddenly decide to seek attention outside her marriage. It's usually a gradual process, fueled by years of emotional neglect, loneliness, and a deep craving for something more. It might start with a casual conversation with a friend or acquaintance who listens more attentively than your husband does. A kind word from someone who notices you in a way your husband no longer does. A feeling of excitement when someone flirts with you or pays you a genuine compliment. And in those moments, you remember what it felt like to be desired, to be interesting, to be cherished. For some women, this emotional void can lead to an emotional affair, a close connection with someone else that feels deeper, more intimate, and more fulfilling than the one they have with their husband. For others, it may lead to a physical affair, not necessarily because they planned it, but because for the first time in a long time, they feel alive again. Why women seek attention outside their marriage. If you've ever found yourself emotionally drawn to someone else, it doesn't necessarily mean you don't love your husband. It means something has been missing for a long time. Women often seek attention elsewhere when they feel unseen and unappreciated at home. They crave deep conversation and emotional connection that their husband no longer provides. They have outgrown their marriage and feel like they need more to feel fulfilled. They miss the feeling of excitement and passion they once had. And the truth is, it's not just about the other person. It's about the way that person makes you feel. The attention, the flattery, the sense of being wanted. It all fills a void that's been left untouched for years. Can emotional distance be repaired? If you've felt emotionally distant from your husband for years, it might feel impossible to rebuild that connection. But it's not. The key is to address the real problem, not just the symptoms. Talk openly about what's missing. Be honest with your husband about what you need emotionally. Reignite small moments of connection. Start with simple things, eye contact, small compliments, or even just sitting closer together. Reflect on your own needs. What do you need to feel alive again? How can you find that within your marriage instead of outside it? Because the truth is, no affair, emotional or physical, can truly fix what's broken. It might fill the void for a moment, but in the long run, the real work has to happen within yourself and your marriage. Section 12. Can love be revived? Hope for long-term marriages. After years, sometimes decades, of emotional distance, resentment, and routine, many women wonder, is it too late for us? The good news? No, it's not too late. But here's the truth. Love doesn't just come back on its own. It has to be rebuilt, piece by piece, moment by moment, effort by effort. Can you fall back in love with your husband? Absolutely. But it won't happen by accident. It happens when two people make the conscious choice to try again. Here's where to start. 1. Acknowledge the distance. Be honest with yourself and with him. Say it out loud. We've grown apart. Naming the problem is the first step to fixing it. 2. Have a real conversation. Not about chores, not about the kids, not about the weather. A real, open-hearted talk about how you feel and what you need. 3. Break the routine. Routine is a marriage killer. Try something, anything, that shakes up your normal pattern. A new restaurant, a new activity, even just taking a walk together. 4. Bring back small acts of kindness. A simple thank you, a compliment, a small touch. Love is built in the smallest moments. 5. Find what makes you happy. Sometimes resentment toward a husband is really frustration with your own life. Take up a hobby, make new friends, do something that brings you joy. When you feel more fulfilled, your marriage will feel less suffocating. 6. Decide if you're both willing to try. A marriage can't be rebuilt by one person alone. If your husband is willing to meet you halfway, there's hope. But if he refuses to change, refuses to listen, and refuses to try, then it's time to ask yourself, what do I want for the rest of my life? Because love doesn't die overnight, and in many cases it can be revived if both people are willing to fight for it. Conclusion: a call to understanding, not blame. Marriage is one of the most complex, beautiful, and challenging relationships in life. And after decades together, it's completely normal to feel frustrated, disconnected, or even resentful toward your husband. But here's what's important to remember. You are not alone. Many women feel this way. It doesn't mean your marriage is broken. It means it has changed. Resentment is a sign that something needs to be addressed. Ignoring it won't make it go away. Love doesn't stay alive on its own. It has to be nurtured, revived, and sometimes rebuilt from the ground up. If you've been feeling distant from your husband, ask yourself, is there still love underneath the frustration? Am I willing to have honest conversations about what I need? Do I want to try to reconnect? Or have I already given up? Because here's the truth. Marriage is not about staying together out of habit. It's about staying together because you choose to, because you still see something worth fighting for. And if that's the case, then maybe, just maybe, this chapter of your marriage doesn't have to be the end. Maybe it can be a new beginning. Final words. If this resonated with you, take a moment to reflect. What is one step you can take today, just one, to start shifting the energy in your marriage? Because love doesn't fade overnight. And with the right effort, it doesn't have to disappear forever. Thank you for being here, for being open to this conversation, and for taking the time to reflect on your own journey. Now the question is, what will you do next?